Hi everyone, thank you for coming and listening to my talk. My name's Caitlin Halfacre. I'm a PhD student at Newcastle University in my fourth year, and this research was funded as part of my PhD by the Economic and Social Sciences Research Council. I'm going to be talking to you today under the title Regional or Regionless, Investigating the Non-Regionality of Received Pronunciation with the GOAT Split. So just a little roadmap as to where we're going. I'm going to briefly outline what RP is, or at least how I define it and approach it for this talk, my methodology, the variables I've looked at, and my results and a conclusion. So first off, what is received pronunciation? Received pronunciation is an accent of English. According to at least Jones and Treadgill, it has fairly unusual origins, having come from the British private education system, but it does have real speakers. It is sometimes used as a kind of reference variety for English language speaking or kind of older phonetic models. And that leads to kind of conversations around whether it's disappearing, who the speakers are, those kind of things. But if we take the approach of Treadgill in 2008, there are still native speakers of this accent. It's just this accent is changing. And so we can treat it like any other variety. That's also backed up by Fabricius 2002 and other papers from her as well. It might be helpful to think about this model of social and regional variation in the UK, which is adapted from Wells 1982, where we look at a kind of socioeconomic spectrum of the UK. I'm not going to dig into how I define social class, but I'm really happy to take questions about that if you have them. But kind of at the bottom here, we've got high levels of regional variation. And then there's the suggestion that as we go up the socioeconomic spectrum, we lose variation. And so you might say the Queen is at the top, or you could just say there's a kind of cloud at the top of speakers who don't sound very different to each other, depending on where they're from. And some writers, in fact, say that an RP speaker can't be located in the country by even a trained linguist. So that's the sort of model we're working under. But kind of we have to define it a little bit smaller to actually try and approach these questions. So first off, what were my research questions? I want to ask, in terms of pronunciation, do English Northeastern RP speakers behave regionally or non-regionally? So if I take speakers who could be defined as RP or from that background, but have grown up in the northeast of England, particularly in Tyneside, do they behave kind of like where they are or like other speakers from a similar background from elsewhere? And what insights can these differences give us into the nature of a non-regional sociolect rather than a kind of regional dialect, which comprises of diffuse speech communities? The first one I hope I'll answer pretty clearly. The second one is sort of some suggestions and possibilities. I think there's a lot more work needed to understand these speaker groups. So just to help us think about how I've approached this, as I said, this is part of my PhD research. These speakers are a really small number of people in the UK, particularly in, I focused in England. But these speakers in the middle, the kind of what I refer to as RP Northeast, corporate Northeast, they're the speakers I'm kind of focusing on. There are 12 of those, they're privately educated. And then I kind of compare them in two directions. So to the right here in purple, I've got Southeast RP speakers from the Southeast, privately educated again. These we might consider our kind of prototypical RP speakers. And then on the left in the red here, I've got a set of speakers, currently only 5, though I am planning to add more in the next month or so, who are state educated in the Northeast. And these were collected separately. These are part of the diachronic corpus of Tyneside English, which is held at Newcastle University. So this is actually a slightly separate set of speakers, and the rest were my interviews for my PhD. So into that data collection a little bit. For those two top groups, the RP groups, were social linguistics interviews, word lists, and minimal pairs. So far, I've not found any differences between those 3 speech contexts. So the data I'm presenting does show those all together, which is particularly helpful when we get into some rather small sets, lexical sets. These were transcribed in ELAN, aligned with the Montreal Forster liner, and measurements were taken using an adjusted version of the fave extract script edited by Warburton 2021 to give trajectory measurements at 10% intervals. So the monophthongs, which I'll only briefly touch on, they were measured at 1/3 duration according to the FAVE criteria, and were modelled with linear mixed effects regression models. And the thongs were measured at 10% intervals of the duration of the vowel, and modelled with generalised additive mixed models. So just a little brief touch on some previous results, just to kind of a little set the scene for the speaker group, I guess. This is some monophthong analysis of the foot strut split and the trap bath split. And so just kind of touching on what these two splits do, because I think they're quite interesting to kind of set us up as to how we understand the speaker group. So first up, the foot strut split. If you're not familiar with variation in England, the foot strut split is the solid line that goes across England here. It's broadly a north-south split, and it's for speakers in the north, these two sets are merged. You've got strut, cup, book, are equivalent to foot, book, etc. Whereas in the south, they're split. So you've got strut, foot, up, put, and those kind of pairs. And that's kind of broadly a north-south split. This is a slightly older map. There is more recent evidence that this line might be kind of moving up or spreading out a little bit. And it is different again in Scotland and Wales, but we're not going to consider those for now. And these are the results that I've had for these groups. So you can see on the right, far right, going across the DECTE speakers, the Tyneside state-educated speakers have completely merged sets here. And the southeast speakers have, that's what we could call a prototypical strut split. In F1, in height, these vowels are separate. And then the northeast speakers do have a split. We can see it, while it is significant, it's maybe not as large or not as robust as the southeast speakers. If we wanted to talk more about, we would see that some of that is because some speakers have a smaller split, and there are one or two speakers that don't have a split. We do see speakers with a split. So we can say that in this context, in this split, northeast speakers are in at least some ways behaving like the southeast speakers. If we go on to the trap bath split, this is another north-south split in England. It's the dotted line here, so slightly higher up. And trap bath is a non-complete contextual phonological change. So it exists in words like bath and grass and glass. It isn't kind of perfectly predictable. So we have this split, but I would say a word like gas, for example. So it's not perfect in that kind of phonological context. But again, it's a kind of north-south indicator in the UK. And here we have a different story. So we can see again, working from the right, the DECTE speakers are completely merged. The southeast speakers are split. The northeast speakers are almost identical to the DECTE speakers. They have a fully merged set as well. So it seems like in this context, these speakers are behaving completely regionally. So just a brief kind of interim summary here. In the foot strut context, these speakers behave kind of with their educational group with speakers from the same background, whereas with trap bath, they behave regionally. So we've got two sort of contradicting stories going on here. And as I said, these variables are both kind of classic northeast things. In the UK, they're quite different in the kind of phonology and social marking of them. And we've got two different sets of behaviour. This led me to want to think a little bit more, maybe about something that's a bit more variable, a bit more unpredictable, but also has quite northeast aspects to it. And that takes me to the goat vowel. And so the first thing to note about the goat vowel is its variability. In the northeast, it's socially stratified. So most commonly, I'm going to try and say these. Most commonly, you'll get a monophthong, which is something like goat. But you also find in older male speakers a kind of goat, a centering diphthong, and in some younger middle class speakers, you get kind of the supranational diphthong, which is goat or goat. Mine's quite front, so it's a little difficult to hear. More recently, that is still found to be very highly variable. In the southeast, we see it has been diphthongal since the 19th century. Fronting also occurred across the country, which was blocked in pre-L contexts, leading to a split between goat and goal. That'll become important in a minute. RP is also diphthongal. It is sometimes described as further forward. That's possibly why I struggle to produce the kind of national one, because mine is quite RP. It's kind of goat with this quite front, particularly onset of the diphthong. And this brings us to the split. So I said that fronting occurred across the country, which was blocked in pre-lateral contexts. So you got goat, goal, hope, hole, boat, bowl. Originally, RP generalized the frontings. So there was no distinction. You get goat, goal, boat, bowl, which Samsung describes as kind of a truly non-regional feature. This was a thing unique to RP. And then more recently, we've seen retraction in the kind of goal, hole, bowl words, which caused a split. This is seen from at least the 2000s in Hannesdal and in later speakers as well. And this could either be a change from below or a kind of independent articulatory effect due to the dark L. That's not a question for now, but we can see this split is a more recent thing and could possibly be a change in progress, or it could be fully reached. We'll have a look at the data now. There's one more interesting thing about this split, which is there is variation within it, particularly in disyllabic contexts with different morphological structures. So we'd have solo and holy, which are disyllabic but monomorphemes, versus words like goalie and bowler, which you can hear for me actually have two different vowels. Solo and holy behave like hope, goat, whereas goalie and bowler have the retracted version of the vowel, like you get in whole and bowl. I frame this within the life cycle of phonological processes. So this retraction is new in RP, and it's kind of, I think, moving through the grammar. And so you can get stage 0 here, which was the original state of RP, where all these contexts, which I will refer to from now with the kind of H words, just to keep things simple, starts with no variation, and then this retraction kind of starts in the monosyllabic monophthong, moves down to the disyllabic, monosyllabic monomorpheme, then moves to the disyllabic morphemic context, and then could possibly move into the disyllabic syllabic monomorpheme, so kind of whole, holy, holy, or whole, holy, holy, and at the moment at least hasn't reached hope. That's still a separate one. So that's a kind of possible framework for understanding this variation, which we will look at again as we go through the data. So what are the results for this? And what I'm going to do here is look at the split and the variation separately, and also kind of give you the comparison. So I'll basically give you the southeast, the northeast, and then these kind of interesting speakers in green in the middle here, so that we get what might happen and then what actually happens. So first up, just the straight split. In the southeast, the kind of RP speakers in the southeast have this split. They don't seem to have this kind of RP generalized fronting. They have hope and whole, which in F2 are completely split, one front, one back. And you can see the effect of that L retraction, both across the whole trajectory, but also in the end of the vowel particularly. And then the DECTE speakers, don't worry too much about the young old split here. I'm not sure it's actually saying anything. This is still quite a small group of speakers, but we can see even from both of these together that these speakers are nowhere near a split. So we're not really seeing a split here. This could be due to the vowel being quite different, or it could be due to, there seems to be some variation in L darkness in the northeast, which I'm not going to go into, but could be affecting that. Then we look at these interesting speakers, the speaker we want to understand. Northeast speakers, these guys look like southeast speakers. They have a split. It's a similar F2. It's robustly there in the old and the young speakers. So far, our northeast speakers are looking like our southeast speakers. Then if we look into the more complex contexts, the southeast speakers seem to be have holy, this disyllabic monomorpheme, is looking like hope. It's still front. Whereas holy, this bimorphemic context, is retracted. And so their split is kind of between these two words. We've got sort of two vowels going on across the four contexts. Northeast speakers don't have a bimorpheme. I didn't have control over this, the data set really for this. It's taken from the DECTE corpus, which already exists. But the other vowels fit pretty much together. The split might be there between the kind of two blue ones, the navy and the turquoise, but really they're kind of sitting all on top of each other. We don't have a split with these speakers. So yet again, we want to ask the question, what are our possible RP speakers, our Northeast privately educated speakers, doing? They seem to be doing something slightly different again. We had the split before, they are split, and this morpheme, the one with the morpheme boundary, has retracted, just like the Southeast speakers, but this one has also retracted. That monomorpheme, the disyllabic one, seems to have retracted as well. And so these speakers are actually doing something different again. They're not behaving like either speaker group. They've started out like the Southeast speakers, but they've done something different in and of themselves. And it would take a lot more work to understand what this is. But there are a few possibilities. One is this is almost a kind of, not a failed acquisition, but a simplified acquisition where these speakers have taken the Southern variation and simplified it. And this phonological rule has just landed as pre-L, pre-lateral, this vowel retracts. That's possible, or it's possible they're further ahead, that actually the Southeast has kind of stabilized, whereas the Northeast has continued to change. Or it's possible they've taken on something that I don't have the data for, which could be a kind of pan-northern effect. Perhaps they aren't behaving like Tynesiders, but they are behaving like Northerners. So there's a few possibilities here, but what we can say is they're not behaving like either speaker group, they're doing their own thing. And so what can we conclude about these speakers? We saw that with Strat and Trap Bath, they behave partly like their educational group, partly like their region, two different things going on. We saw with the goat split, just the straight goat gull, goat hole split, they behave with their educational group, again, with the speakers from the same background. But with the morphological variation, they're doing something different. They are sitting perhaps at this stage 3, they're further through the change for some reason that we don't necessarily know, in a different way to the Southeast speakers, which are sat at stage 2, with whole and holy, with the morpheme boundary, one pair of vowel, holy and hope, front per vowel. So with these kind of 4 possibilities, how can we answer the question in terms of pronunciation? Do English Northeastern RP, possible RP speakers, behave regionally or non-regionally? And the answer is kind of a little bit of both and none of the above. They do some regional variation, they do some non-regional variation, some kind of pan, like supranational, everyone's doing it in this, for people from this background, but they also do something of their own as well. So perhaps this is a kind of speech community that's doing its own thing. It's a kind of upper middle class educational group within Tyneside that's doing something by itself. And that leads us to kind of the second question. What insights do these differences give us into the nature of a non-regional sociolect comprising of diffuse speech communities? And I think this is a huge question. This is, my supervisor described it recently as a career question rather than a PhD question. Some suggestions I want to give though are, this speech community seems to be both large and small in the sense of we've got things happening across the whole country. We've got speakers all from this background doing things together, but then we've got unique things happening perhaps kind of within the regions as well. So perhaps we've almost got 2 levels. We've got some variables which do whole things, kind of whole country things, and some variables which do kind of more unique things in different spaces. So that's kind of where I've landed with this speaker group. So I want to say thank you so much for taking the time for coming to listen to my talk. And I really look forward to talking to those of you who can make it in the discussion section. But if you can't, you can also reach out to me on Twitter and email, and the slides will be uploaded as well, so you can have a look at those separately if you'd like to. I'm also just going to scroll through my references slowly so that they save on the video, and those will also be on the slides uploaded as well, so you can download this as well. Thank you again for listening. Look forward to speaking to you all soon.